when I had agreed to do this, I started thinking I knew this was my responsibility, and Madeline was one of really the first people that came to mind, as well as I was honest with her, one other person that we knew. I served at the 52nd and 53rd General Service Conferences with Madelene, and we both chaired our conference committees, and we just had a fabulous time. We attended the board weekend together, and we finished our service, and we kind of went on, and there was no social media then or anything like that. I ran into her by God incidents at the, I think it was 2005 International Convention. I think it was 2000 International Convention. So, 2005 International Convention. So, but in any event, this Facebook thing came out, and we found each other pretty quickly with all these other AA connections and all that kind of thing, and have gone back and forth with some of that and talked on the phone a few times here and there leading up to this. And, it's like we never missed a beat, and it made me think of what we talk about in AA. Friendships in AA are lasting, and they are. So, but Madelene was a great example to me in serving with her and with her demeanor. She is just basically just an honorary nerd. When we served at the conference, each region kind of does their thing on different nights, and Madelene just came along with the nerds every time. So we went to Starbucks and sung into ketchup bottles and all of that kind of stuff, and we just had a great time. But on a serious note, though, through all of that, I certainly saw a deep love for Alcoholics Anonymous in her heart. And she has a wonderful message of experience, strength, and hope. And would you please help me welcome Madelene?
Hi, everybody. My name is Madelene, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November the 14th of 1985. My home group is the How It Works group that meets in Happy Valley, Oregon on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. And believe it or not, we could probably fit half of you there. Not all of you at the same time, but a good portion of you. You guys do throw a nice party, but I do have to tell you, y'all talk funny. As Bob said, I was a Panel 52 delegate from Idaho Area 18, and served as the Pacific Regional Trustee from 2006 to 2010. And I know there were some people in this audience who just said, "Oh no, it's going to be a service talk." Just so you'd be relieved, yes, it's going to be a service talk. Because the service manual says on the first page that an AA service is anything that helps carry the 12-step message. The biggest disservice those of us in general service can ever do to the fellowship is to tell them that the only service is general service. General service is just one kind of service. It takes everyone in AA to get all the wheels turning in the right direction. From that greeter, from that home group member, from that coffee maker, everyone has a part to play in AA. The biggest deal is that everybody needs to do their part. If you think when you hear these acronyms, by golly, if it's for you, go for it with all the gusto you got in your heart. If you get in there and you say, "I absolutely hate this," then stop punishing the rest of us and go find something else to do. For those of you who may have noticed, I have a little twang. I'm born and raised Houston, Texas, and I have to tell you that this is not something that I set out to do when I came into AA. I was the neurotically shy child. I don't know if there are any other people like that. When we talk about painfully shy, it was absolutely bone-crushing, introverted shy when I was a child. And when I came into AA, I was never the person who sat in the back of the room and looked up here and said, "Boy, I want to do that someday." I would have rather taken a beating. I was really good at making grades, but if you made me get in front of people, I just absolutely hyperventilated. I had this bad habit. We found out later I had a defective vagal nerve, but that was stopping my heart, but I would hyperventilate, throw up, and pass out. And sometimes pee my pants. Fun at parties, but but so getting up in front of people was never something I wanted to do, and I sure didn't want to do it when I came in here. And when some of the people know that podiums for me, I think they ought to just come with stirrups, because I feel the same way when I go to the gynecologist. It's not natural. I don't want to share while I'm there. And no matter how many times I go to the bathroom, I still need to pee and have gas when I get up here. I'm the kind of girl that would like fake my own death if either one of those things happened. And so when I came in, this was not my idea of fun. But I remember I was asked to share fairly early in my sobriety, and I went to my sponsor and I said, look, it had been one of those weeks where every crappy piece of wreckage was finding me, and I did not want to go tell my story. And so I went to her with an honest AA request. I said, look, I have nothing good to share. What am I going to tell these people? Stay sober and your life can suck too? And and she said, well, if you can find it in the big book where you can say no, sure. And it was the absolute drunk trap, right? She knew that I was going to go through that book, pouring through that book, trying to find some place. Because, I mean, face it, there's got to be some place where it says, if you're that sick, please stay home, don't spread the disease. I just knew. And what I found came to be my favorite paragraph of the big book. And it's page 102. And it says, your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand, podiums. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. And so I'd love to tell you that I'm here out of, selfless nature, but that would be such a crock. I'm here because I don't ever want to feel the way I felt the day I walked in these doors almost 27 years ago, plain and simple. And I haven't had to feel that way in almost 27 years. For those of you who are new in this room, I know that I didn't think that pain would ever stop. And I stand before you today to tell you that. It doesn't mean that I haven't had some pain in these last 27 years, but it's a different kind of pain. There is something about walking through life sober that makes you feel grown up. Now, I told you I was born in Houston, Texas, and I was born into a bleeding deacon Southern Baptist family. My parents are both dead, but their names were Joseph and Mary. No shit. Anyway. I felt really cheated when I first came to AA, and you guys had all these great stories about the drunken brawls and the fighting. My family was so boring. I mean, I could just flash and picture your family and all the, stuff going on, and then you just like flash over to mine, you could hear the crickets. It was terrible. My dad was a type who might drink a beer mowing the lawn and not finish it. My mother was a kind of person who would drink about 1, maybe 2 fingers of wine and go, woo, I have to stop. I'm starting to feel it. And as a small child, this made me crazy. Now, my twin brother and I are the youngest of 6, which explains why my mother was crazy. But I knew from the time I was little, I couldn't wait to drink. I couldn't wait to try other things. And I used to think, this is odd. I don't grow up around people who actively drink, but I couldn't wait to drink. I felt like that person. We used to always tease my twin brother that he was adopted. The gypsies left him on the doorstep because he had this little dimple in his ear. It used to make him mad. We said, yeah, that was where your earring was. But I was the one who always felt like the outsider. I was the one who always felt like I didn't fit in this family because of all this stuff that went on in my head. People would ask me, they would say, oh, you're from a big family, I bet you're really close. And that used to really bother me because we weren't. I mean, we were strangers. I mean, there was some age difference between the older and the younger, but we were strangers. My twin brother, and I can tell you that sobriety's changed that, but people would say to me, you have a twin, I bet you're really close. And I would look at them with a blank stare. because we are, to this day, polar opposites. And I cannot believe I ever shared a room with that boy. And I had no idea what they were talking about, this closeness, because I grew up in this very emotionally sterile family. My dad was in the music business, which is another one of those anomalies of being Southern Baptist and being a music producer. But they say Baptists are like cats. They're doing it. You just can't catch them. And, but my dad would get these massive bottles of booze for presents. I mean, these huge, limited edition decanters. And my mother was a type of wacko who would say, how pretty, and she'd put it on the shelf for decoration. And it wasn't until after I got sober that my mother found out that those bottles had had water in them for years. I don't know if anyone else mastered the art of food coloring, but I did at a young age. But I couldn't wait to drink. I couldn't wait to feel different. I was really good at hiding. If there's anyone else in here, we talk about nerds, geeks, but I was that original geek that if I flew under the radar and hid behind my books and didn't draw any attention to myself, I was going to be okay. But I can tell you, puberty hit, and I decided I had milked all the fun there was out of straight A's and a report card. I wanted to try a different side of life. I'm absolutely positive it's when I stole my first pack of cigarettes, and my twin brother and I decided to have a drink. And he is my absolute classic twin study, because you watched him take that drink, and it went down, and it went plop. It didn't do anything to him. And I took that first drink, and it went down, and it went boom for me. Absolutely, you could tell from watching us that it did something to me that it did not do to him. And that was going to be the way I drank for the rest of my life. Every time, the first time how many 13-year-olds drink socially? But from the first time I drank to the last time I drank the same way. I always drank like a pig. I always wanted to drink as much as I could get my hands on. And so having him as a drinking partner was really no problem, because I always drank all of his. And so, for me, it was, this made me feel not like that geek, not like that person who was terrified of someone looking at him. And for, people who know me a lot of times think, oh my God, you were shy? And I would say, yeah, the alcohol never wore off. But I drank alcohol, and I was okay. It wasn't even about being wonderful. I was okay. I was just all right. I didn't feel like I felt like I could walk in front of people. I don't know if there's anyone else in there. I would pee my pants before I had to walk out in front of the classroom to go to the bathroom. It was a good thing I became a nurse later on in life, because I can hold it forever. But I didn't want to do anything where I called attention to myself. And boy, when I drank, I didn't care anymore. And that freedom to be someone other than me, I chased for a long time, and chased it long and hard. Now, I had, like I said, it's a wonder I didn't die. I had this defect, which I didn't know at that time. But, I always had consequences with my drinking. They just weren't enough consequences for me to want to quit. I was a puker. I know y'all always love having someone like me talk after dinner. But I threw up all the time. It was like no big deal. I thought true love was holding back my hair. I figure if you asked me out on a second date after I'd thrown up on you, you liked me. You really, really liked me. And I was the kind of drunk who would go outside and stick my finger down my throat so I could go drink some more. And if anybody just said, ooh, I think you're in the wrong room. Being sick was never a deterrent. It was never a deterrent for me. And I can tell you that I was in the right place at the right time when I was young, and I got a job making a lot of money. In the meantime, I married him. He was my high school sweetheart, and it was horrid from the beginning. We fought all the time, mostly about how much I drank. And when we absolutely could not make it work, we got married. Alcoholic solution. But I had a great job, and if there's anything that can kill an alcoholic, is health, wealth, youth, and intelligence. And I was young, and I was smart, and I was making money hand over fist, and I had a job where I didn't have hours. I had a full expense account. I had a credenza full of booze. I drank at work. And I hate to use the word functional, because that's really stretching it. But But I made a lot of money, and that's what business is about. Make a lot of money. You bring in a lot of money, people let a whole lot of stuff slide. During this happy marriage, I found out I was pregnant, and I was not happy. Part of my story is, I grew up in this very sterile family, but it doesn't mean that it was safe. There was a lot of stuff that happened to me as a young child that I had no control over, and all I knew is that I didn't want it to happen to anyone else. And part of that for me was I don't want to be responsible for another human being, and I didn't want to be a mom. I didn't want to have the emotional responsibility of raising someone else and keeping them safe. Because part of what I did when I threw that alcohol in there was to try to cover up this monster that I felt like lived within me. And lo and behold, I ended up pregnant. And I remember I cried so hard when I found out I was pregnant. And it was too late for there to be any other decision. And I knew my poor mother had been wanting grandchildren for a long time. But I was in a terrible marriage. My first ex-husband, you love when we have numbers. First ex-husband was not an alcoholic. He didn't drink. I mean, he drank some. I think I saw him drunk like 3 times, and he was terrible. It was like, oh, man up, pussy, you're horrible. But his drug of choice was rage. So I didn't grow up with an angry household, and he was very angry, and I couldn't imagine I was bringing this child into this, but I was going to make the most of it. And I can tell you what happened was that, after I had my daughter, and part of my story of being an alcoholic woman is I drank when I was pregnant. I didn't get drunk, but I continued to drink. I had a doctor who told me that it was okay to have a glass of wine or a beer, and trust me, I did. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's something I had to face as an alcoholic woman. Pregnancy was not going to be enough to keep me from drinking. It wasn't. And after she was born, I just threw myself into working as much as possible. So I didn't have to be at home with that no-fun husband, and I didn't have to worry about taking care of this child that I felt absolutely inadequate to take care of. I was really good at making a buck. I could take care of her physically, but I didn't want to be responsible for her emotionally. And God bless my mother, who never said anything to me. She just suited up and showed up and never said anything to me about the time I was gone. And that whole justification, I make a lot of money. I'm working hard. She just took care of my daughter. Never questioned me, never judged me, just took care of my daughter. And the thing was that, see, I was always an out-of-control drunk. When I got to drink like I wanted to drink, I was an out-of-control drunk. And I was a driving drunk, and I've been a blackout drinker almost from the very beginning. And, coming to on the highways of Houston and trying to figure out where I was. Coming to the next morning and trying to remember how I even got home. I definitely at least had this innate sense that I did not want my daughter in the car, that I could not take a chance, because when I pick up a drink, I can't predict and I can't control what's going to happen to me. And that was my pattern. So she stayed with my mom a lot. Now, believe it or not, this little storybook romance began to unravel. And and when he left, I said, thank God he's gone. I can drink like I want to. Now, I'll tell you, I'm a child of the 70s and a young adult of the 80s, and I did alcohol and all of its cousins. And and during this time, I was really fast. If y'all think I'm fast now, I just vibrated back then. And my poor ex-husband would say, she worked all day long and she was cleaning the house at 3 a.m. I do miss those days. Remember you could clean your whole house in 30 minutes? I do miss that. But what started happening to me was that when he was gone and the gloves were off and I could do what I wanted to do, I was gone. I was gone every single night. And I had this job where I had all this freedom, and I had this boss who was a wonderful man. To this day, he's the best boss I'll ever have in the whole world. I used to call him Daddy Dale. He wasn't but a few years older than the rest of us, but he treated me as well as a father would have. And he didn't know what to do with me because, I was a mess. And I remember one day he called me in his office, and he yelled at me about how I looked. Now, I know now, from doing enough 12-step calls, that I had to stink. You can put on all the eau de parfum you want, just like eau de bo. And I had long hair, and I was, a smoker, and I lived in bars, and I just know that I had to be a pretty picture. I don't care how expensive the suit was when I came vibrating into the office in the morning. And I remember he took me to task about the way I looked, and I was so mortified that he would take issue with the way I looked. I thought, I cannot believe I have seen your wife. Who is a lovely woman, by the way. But what had happened was he had gone to my employee assistance director who had said, you can't touch her. You can't lay a finger on her. Her alcoholism, her obvious alcoholism, has not affected her job. She doesn't have office hours. She makes more money, brings in more money than anybody else. You can't touch her. You can be ready when she asks for help, or you can wait until it gets really, really bad, and then you can intervene. And I have to think what it was like for this poor guy watching me just crash and burn. But I did try to get him off my back, and I went to see the employee assistance director, who I instinctively lied to whenever she asked me about my drinking. I was willing to go boo-hoo-hoo, I'm getting a divorce. He's such an a-hole. But anytime she asked me about my alcohol consumption or anything else, I lied like a rug, automatically. Didn't even think about the fact that there was no way I was going to tell this woman how much I drank. I remember looking at her and thinking, you have on a puffy sleeve blouse and a cardigan, kind of like I have on tonight. And and I thought, I'm not telling you anything. You don't understand my life. I'm not telling this woman anything. I'm here to get my boss off my back, make him feel better. Off I went. Now, part of my story as an alcoholic woman is I got so physically drunk I couldn't protect myself. And the bad part about that was I wasn't mentally drunk. My brain was wide awake and working. And I got myself in some situations where I wasn't safe. And I'd love to tell you it only happened once, but it happened more than once. But the worst for me was coming to, covered in blood, and praying that it was my blood and not someone else's, that I hadn't hurt someone while I was blacked out, and being relieved when I realized that the bleeding was my own. And having to be that girl who goes to the ER and sits in the waiting room for hours waiting to be seen. And they were nice enough to bring me a towel so I wouldn't bleed on their furniture. And I had hand marks over my neck where I'd been strangled when I lost consciousness, and having people point and stare. And all I remember was staring at my feet and wishing I had a drink. I can tell you that the full circle for that was sober. I went back to school and became a forensic nurse so I could take care of sexual assault victims, and that nobody ever sat in a waiting room on a bloody towel with people pointing at them, to where no one ever had to say, you caused this, you made this happen. Because today I know no one has a right to do that to me, drunk or sober. But I didn't get sober because it happened to me. I drank with even more of the vengeance. And the night when I realized I had a problem was a night like any other night. There was nothing special about that night. I said the same promises I'd said before. It wasn't like I didn't know what right and wrong were. I had a mom who was like kind of this cross between Edith Bunker and Mrs. Olson from the Folgers coffee commercials. I knew what that looked like, and that made it worse, right? That made it even worse. And I would tell myself, I'm going to stay home tonight. I'm going to cook my daughter a meal, a real meal that didn't come out of the microwave. I'm going to watch a movie or read a book with her. I'm going to clean my house. I want to go to work tomorrow and stay all day, not take the 4-hour tequila lunch. And you know what? The phone rang, and I was off. It never took anything for me to change my mind about why it was I needed to not drink that day. Now, I never thought about quitting. That never entered my mind. Slowing down, healing up, moderating, but never quitting drinking. But that night, the phone rang and I was off. And that night was like any other night. I got so physically drunk I couldn't protect myself. But I remember I was looking at these 2 girls I was with. Beautiful, beautiful girls, acquaintances. I wouldn't even call them friends. I wouldn't say don't know their last names, but I know a lot of people in AA don't know their last names. They're my friends. But I looked at them and I thought, oh my God. I mean, and they were selling their soul for a drink or a drug. And I remember I looked at them and they talk about how in this program, how your assets become your liabilities and your liabilities become your assets. Well, one of my biggest liabilities is I am a terribly opinionated, judgmental a-hole. I love to take your inventory. Or as my sponsor says, we're not gossiping, we're just reporting. And but I looked at those girls and I was just disgusted with their behavior. And I remember thinking, my God, Madelene, what's a nice girl like you doing with these two drunk cocaine whores? And and this voice out of nowhere said, have you taken a look at you lately? I don't know where that came from. I drank to keep that voice real quiet. And I remember looking and thinking, oh my God, I am no different from them. I love to sit here and justify that my behavior is somehow, a notch above or I'm half a car length behind. I was no different. I would sell my soul to feel different. And, that night got worse. The next day, once I found my car, and of course I had to call my boss and tell him I had car trouble, my brand new car, one more time. And because I didn't know where my car was, you have to have car trouble if you don't know where it is. That's trouble. That's definite trouble. But I made it to my office and I'd made the decision. I'm out of here. And I called my big brother and I asked him if I could move in with him. I was going to move to Los Angeles to get away from alcohol and drugs. But I remember my boss, I gave him my letter of resignation, and he came in and he sat across from me, and this beautiful, Greek guy with these huge lashes sat across from me, and he had tears streaming down his cheeks, and I said, I'm an alcoholic, and I can't do this anymore. And the only thing I know to do is get out of here. And I remember he reached across the desk, and he took my hand with tears streaming down his cheeks, and with absolute sincerity, he looked me in the eye, and he said, have you ever tried drinking just a little? And I was pissed. I felt so hopeless and so helpless and so angry because I thought, no, I haven't. And on top of that, I don't want to. I have never wanted one drink unless it was in a bucket. But he sent me home because I was not in the best of shape, and he knew something I didn't know. And he could tell by the look in my eyes I was going to try to take my life. And later that day, one of my employees showed up, and he had sent her to come babysit me. And I talked her into going and getting drunk. I don't think that was in his plan. But I'll tell you what, it kept me alive. And I am one of those people who I still hate to say, is alcohol a problem in your life? Alcohol saved my life for years until I found these rooms. Alcohol was that substitute until I could find a sufficient substitute, a much better substitute for a design for living. I think if I hadn't found alcohol, I probably would have blown my brains out before I was 18 years old. Alcohol kept me alive long enough to find you. And so that next week, I tried to kill myself with everything I could. I put everything I could in my body, and I couldn't drink, and I couldn't quit. And I certainly couldn't live that way, so my only option was I wanted to die. And I can tell you that I sat all night long with a loaded gun, taking it in and out of my mouth, wishing I had the courage to pull the trigger. I know what that pain feels like. I've lost friends, drunk and sober, who felt that same pain. And I don't judge anybody, because I have no clue what the difference is between me standing here and those people who aren't here today. I know what it feels like to be that deeply immersed in that pain that you can't see any way out. I worked as a trauma nurse, and one night I had a young woman in my ER who had tried to take her life. She was an alcoholic. And I had left the room, but I heard through the curtain the social worker who was in there taking care of her tell her that she was a coward for trying to take her life. Yeah. So I pulled the curtain back, and I asked him if I could have a word with him out at the nurse's station. And we had a little come to Jesus at the nurse's station. I said, I don't know. And I knew this young man's background and, where he grew up. And I said, I don't know if you know what it feels like to walk in her shoes. I do. I said, but if you don't know what it feels like to be at that point to where your only solution is taking your life, if you think throwing more guilt and shame on her by telling her she's a coward is helpful, might I suggest a change of profession? Because that sucks. I know when I felt that pain, I felt like I was doing everybody a bloody favor. It wasn't anything. There was no drama. I felt like everybody would be better off if I wasn't there. And if you think telling me one more load of gasoline on that fire is going to help, I said, I'll show you where's hell. And I took him to the website, and I showed him the website, and I showed him where the answering service numbers were. And I said, if you really want to help, here's meeting schedules. Here's people who will come up and talk to her. I said, this is help. And I can tell you he never told anybody they were a coward again today. And we're friends on Facebook. Anyway. But you know, that night I did something I don't remember doing, which was I called that employee assistance director the next morning and I asked for help. And I went in to see her, and she gave me the same test she gave me before, but this time I got an A. My drunk boyfriend had driven me there, and she said, are you willing to do anything to change your life? And I said, I'm willing to walk down the middle of Woodlands Parkway naked if it'll help. And she giggled because I had. And got my picture in the paper. Boy, was my boss proud. And but she said, well, you're going to go to this place. And I didn't have a clue. I am sure I'd probably heard the words Alcoholics Anonymous in passing, never thought about them. During this time, my boss had been dropping articles for months in my in-basket about alcoholism and women, business women who drink, all this crap. This is long before the internet. He was working hard to find these articles, and I never knew they were for me. I always thought my secretary Xeroxed the wrong page out of the journal. I was always like, what the hell? And I just pitched them because I didn't have a problem. So the next thing I know, I'm being whisked off to chemical camp. And some drunk packed my bag. But all I knew was that I was so grateful for that desperation, that pain that said, I'm willing to do anything, because I was gone. And this was a lockdown unit that didn't let you out, didn't let you go out on passes or anything, you know. And it was a crappy place too. I remember I always called it the Howard Johnson's of treatment centers. I remember thinking, don't I have better insurance than this? I work for a Fortune 500 company. It was horrid. Anyway, I got there and they locked me up. And shortly after I got there, they brought my roommate in. And she was this beautiful, tall British nurse who had a bad habit of a little for you and a lot for her. And I remember sitting there, and they had literature that they had already brought into the room, because it was like a hardcore place. They didn't let you have anything except for your AA literature. And I looked and I saw the books and I thought, I'm not going to be here that long. But they had pamphlets. I thought, light reading. I'll read a pamphlet. Well, I started reading those pamphlets and they were talking about not drinking one day at a time. But I am smart and I read right through that crap. They were talking about never drinking again, and I freaked out. I had no clue that Alcoholics Anonymous or treatment or anything was about not drinking ever again. I don't know that someone would have got me in the car if I'd known that, truly to this day. And I thought, oh my God, Madelene, you drama queen, you have overreacted one more time. How are you going to get out of here? And the whole time I was trying to convince myself that I was not an alcoholic, all I could think was, oh my God, I would give anything for a drink right now. I would take drugs I don't like. I would do anything to change the way I feel right now. And this little voice said, normal people don't get themselves locked up wearing other people's jammies, trying to convince themselves that they're not an alcoholic and wanting to drink at the same time. And that was that part of that first step for me. I can't drink. When I drink, I can't predict nor control what happens to me. And I've proven that I am absolutely nuts, drinking or sober. So I knew that part about unmanageability in the second step in that insanity, because I was there. Now, part of what happened to me for then is that I started making little hash marks like prisoners do, because they only give you the golf pencil because they're afraid you're going to kill yourself with a regular pencil. But I I was trying to figure out how long I was going to be there. And I knew I'd put myself in there for my brother's wedding because it was the next weekend. But I knew that I would have been wasted at that wedding. I'd have been wasted anywhere, but it would have been that good excuse to tie one on. And then I realized I'd set myself up. I'd put myself in there for Thanksgiving, and I thought, it's not a big holiday. It's not a big deal. But then came my moment, because I realized I put myself in there for Christmas. And this little light bulb went off and said, oh, you have a daughter, 3 years old. And it was the first moment I really and truly ever paid any attention to the fact that my actions hurt other people. Because I justified and I rationalized my behavior to where she's got a great life. She goes to a great school. She's got great care. We've got a wonderful home. I make a lot of money. She's not hurt. But here I was going to be locked up for Christmas. And I knew that I wasn't going to be there. And I started to cry. And then I started to sob, and then it became a Southeast Texas wail. And I remember my poor roommate. She had a little boy the same age. And I'm like losing it over the fact that I have just screwed my daughter over. And what a horrible person I am, and I'm a terrible mother. And I always remember Sandra coming over, and she was very emotionally sterile British woman, and she was kind of stiffly patting my back. And then all of a sudden, I saw her shoulders start to go, and she just lost it. And she just started sobbing uncontrollably. And there we are, just slinging snot everywhere. And I remember she said, oh, Madelene, how did we get ourselves into this bloody effing mess? And I remember the director of that rehab, who was a member of the fellowship, came in, and he's like trying to, he's toilet paper everywhere. And I remember him trying to tell us, he said, you were giving your kids the best Christmas present you could ever give them. And I thought, oh my God, what a bunch of crap. She is 3 years old, and I guarantee she wants toys. But I also knew that in spite of everything, I knew that she loved me and she wanted me home. And there was nothing I could do about that. I can tell you today that the best Christmas present I ever gave my daughter, the best birthday present I ever gave my daughter, the best anything I ever gave that little girl was becoming a sober mother in Alcoholics Anonymous, hands down. You guys showed me how to be a mom. I didn't know what to do. You treated her like a little drunk. I'd bring her to meetings. And you showed me what physical affection was. You showed me what it was to say and act like I love you. Not just say the physical words, but follow it up with the actions that match it. And I can tell you, she's gotten the best of Alcoholics Anonymous sitting in those rooms. You can always tell the Alabrat, they got the Happy Meal in the coloring book. And she just grew up surrounded by all of you. My sponsor would fill her full of chocolate during meetings and then hand her back to me at the end of the meeting. Woo, she's yours. And he's like crackhead bouncing off the walls. But she loved it. She, to this day, loves Alcoholics Anonymous, loves every woman I sponsor. I remember sitting in a dentist's office when she was little, and she's always been a chatty child, never met a stranger, and she's chatting up this little woman who looks kind of like Church Lady from Saturday Night Live. And she's telling her all about all the uncles who spend the night at her house on her mama's couch. And she's naming them, and she's up to about 10. And then she's going, but they're not really my uncles. Mama says I can just call them that. And I'm getting the stink eye from Church Lady, and I thought, there is no way I'm going to explain to this woman that these are the wonderful men that I know in AA who can come over and hang out, sleep on my couch, and be just like a brother to me, be just like an uncle to her. And I thought, I can't go there. I'm not explaining it. She's just going to have to think I'm a hoe. So. But I can tell you that probably one of the most important things that ever happened to me coming into these rooms was having a sponsor. And when I was in that rehab, there was an old guy who was a volunteer in there, and his name was Frenchie. He was an old coon-ass. And he had been sober since, like, Jesus was a little kid. And he knew everybody in Houston. And so I asked him if he would help me find a temporary sponsor. And he scratched his head, and he said, let me think about it. And he came back, and he handed me a number. And he said, here, this lady, Judy M. He said, you call her and ask her to be your temporary sponsor. She'll do it. Okay? So I called her up on the phone, and she answered, and she was extremely sweet to me on the phone. I found out later that was an act. And but she said, great, your first night out, I'll be chairing the meeting. I'm easy to spot. I'll see you then, and we can go have coffee afterwards. And I can tell you my first night out, probably one of the most important things I did after getting out of treatment was go to a meeting that first night, and there she was. And she waved at me when I walked in. I don't know how she knew it was me, but she waved at me, and I immediately hated her. She hadn't said a thing. And the more that meeting went on, and she's just chairing the meeting, not even really talking, but I immediately knew she was wrong, and no one told me you could fire people, and I thought, great, Frenchie's got me matched up with this perfect woman. And I just did that whole, like, female thing where we go, no, that's not gonna work. Didn't matter how long she'd been sober or her program or anything, I just knew she couldn't be right for me. We went and had coffee with her oldest baby and that baby's oldest baby, and and she and her oldest baby, Utah, didn't even, like, hide the fact that they thought I was full of crap I was just telling my plans for sobriety, and they were, like, rolling around in the booth and high-fiving each other and poking each other. And we were thinking, how rude. I'm serious. And, but what she did have was the program. She believed that you get all the way in the program. You know, we have a saying out west, I don't know if you have it here, but it's harder to shoot the elk in the middle of the herd. And she said, if you want me to be your sponsor, I'm willing to help you any way I can. My job is guidance and direction. And that guidance and direction is working all 12 steps and getting all the way in the program, being actively involved in your home group, and anything else that needs to be done around here. If you want to do that, great. If you don't tell anybody I'm your sponsor. And there was something scary about her. She was only about 90 pounds, but trust me, grown men shook in their shoes when she walked in. And because she had this strength. I know some people like to think about, oh, she's got balls. I don't want balls. I've seen them a couple times. They're not I don't consider them to be an attractive fashion accessory. I prefer ovaries of steel. And she had them. You could hear them clink when she walked, you know. And I am so grateful I had her because she kept me safe. You know, I talk about that stuff that happened to me when I was drinking. Unfortunately, I can tell you about the bad stuff that's happened to me sober of men who are inappropriate. And I'm not making a sweeping statement, trust me. But I'm talking about those minority of individuals who are inappropriate with the women in these rooms. And it goes the other way, too. But all I can share is my own personal experience, which was being jumped by a member of the fellowship who was old enough to be my father, that I thank God, I was stone cold sober, and I grew up with the twin brother, and I punched the shit out of him. But I also had a sponsor who taught me, be rude. You don't have to be nice to that person. They're not being nice. They're trying to take advantage of you. I don't know if anybody in here has ever gotten the creepy hug. I've had mammograms that weren't that personal. And I'm the first person to try to make sure that the newcomer is safe here. We spend so much lip service talking about how important and special the newcomer is, and quite frankly, sometimes our actions don't show it. I believe that we need to make sure that they get a chance to get a foundation in this program, just like the literature talks about. Not talking about, meeting each other in these rooms. I'm talking about making sure someone gets an opportunity to have a foundation. And I think if your little inner dialogue goes something like, he or she's brand new, boy, I really should back away from that, but if I don't strike now, someone else will get them. You know what? That's a predator. It's also a douche nozzle. So... So, not winning any popularity contest yet. But one of the things that woman did for me was she kept me safe, and I just somehow knew that I could do those steps with this lady. There was a confidence about her. When I say confidence, I mean that she wasn't going to take my stuff out on the street. Now, I sat in these rooms long enough with you to know that some of the stuff I was wanting to take to my grave, you were like blabbing about it in the meeting. I always used to have this urge to put my hand over your mouth and go, shh. Don't be telling people that stuff. I mean, I just couldn't believe some of the stuff you shared at meetings. Still can't today sometimes. But I was terrified to tell someone the things I thought and I felt. Those were the things I was terrified to share with that other human being. But it kept me so separated from you. Because coming in here, it was like having that arm out that said, but if you really knew me, you won't love me. So even when I was sitting in these rooms until I worked those steps and shared that step with another individual, the stuff that made me physically and emotionally and spiritually bankrupt, I wasn't ever going to be able to feel your love because there was always going to be that but attached to it if you really knew me. So sitting down with her and sharing that fifth step, all of it, and knowing that I left there feeling like she loved me more, hands down. If there's anything I know today about the people I love and the relationships I have, I learned it from that woman. Because she showed me what unconditional love was. That it didn't matter who I was or what I was or where I'd been or what I'd done. She loved me, period. You know, when I had to think about what kind of concept of a higher power I wanted in my life, that's what I thought about. That unconditional love that I was shown by that woman who didn't know me from Adam. You know, she moved when I was 3.5 years sober, and her oldest sponsee, Utah, unless you're from Texas and you call her Utah, became my sponsor. You know, it's like, tag, you're it. Now, this woman can still slaughter the English language like nobody's business, even after living in the States for all this time, but she's known me from that first day. And one of the things I want to talk about was how important it was for me to do that and to keep going. When we talk about pivotal, all the steps are important. I don't think you can miss any of them. But for me, going into 6 and 7, I always call 7th the secret handshake of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because see, for me, I know that it says, these are just suggestions, and Bill was very gracious. These are just suggested. But for me, coming to AA and not working the steps is like throwing up and not opening your mouth. It's going to feel good for a minute, and then it's going to get real uncomfortable. Because not drinking was not the solution. Not drinking meant all that stuff was alive and awake and ready to argue in my head. I needed solution. And so 7 to me, when it talks about humility and it calls it a precious quality. And I had humility so confused with humiliation. Humility for me is the ability to be human. Let me be human and let you be human. To know I have shortcomings and you have shortcomings. That spirituality of imperfection, right? And what that 7 step says to me is that if all I have is only enough that all I do is quit drinking, I'm not going to stay sober. Because what happens if all I do is just not drink, I'm not going to change. And if I don't change, I'm not going to be happy. And if I'm not happy, I will return to drinking. That's why moving forward with those steps was so important. Not just going, did a 5th, but keeping going. And I don't believe that I was able to just say, okay, I'm going to put this off. She kept me on that path. She said, you need to write out these amends. Because I am the kind of person who can sit on a couch eating a Snickers and drinking a Dr. Pepper, watching an exercise video going, yeah, I could do that. I needed to have those lists. I needed to have those amends and know who I needed to be making amends to. And I came from the school that said make now, maybe later, and never columns. And the nows were the ones that were either way too painful, I needed to get them out of the way, or they were the ones that would pat me on my little head and say, oh, honey, we just loved you anyway, and I could go, check. And those maybe laters and those nevers were the ones that were sticky. But I'd said that, I made that prayer, please help me be willing to be willing if the opportunity arises. And I felt I was safe, because there were like 6 people on my never list. 5 of them I didn't know their last names and should never run into again in a city of 4 million people. And the other one was my father. I knew his last name. But, and I only came to town once a year. And I can tell you that all 6 of those people all showed up within the next 6 months of my sobriety. And I remember thinking, oh my God, are you kidding me? That I run into him at something like a professional meeting or something that I should never see again. But I can tell you, because it was in there and it was on paper, I knew that this was not a coincidence. It was my higher power giving me the opportunity to be able to look the world in the eye and to not have to duck and hide anymore. So clearing away that wreckage. And, my father, that relationship was never what I wanted. And I don't know if anybody else in here came in and you saw those relationships with other people that just came back with their family, and it was like Donna Reed and her daughter Mary, and I was never going to have that. And part of that inventory was accepting my family for exactly who they were and how they were and loving them for who they were. And then any changes, it was probably small potatoes in your family, was huge for me. But my relationship with my father was never what I wanted. And it was difficult. But I can tell you that I did the best I could, and I made amends to that man. And when he died, I stood by his grave and I had no guilt. Most important one was when my mom died. And I knew that she knew I was going to be okay. Because she had years of worrying about me and worrying about her little granddaughter. And she knew that we were going to be okay. No greater gift I could have given that woman than to not be the flake and the pain in her life anymore. To know that I was all right. I went from her being embarrassed that I was an alcoholic to having to tell her to please not tell everyone that I was an alcoholic. I'd be in line at the grocery store and the checker would be like, "Oh, you're Mary's daughter." And it's like, she sent everyone to Alcoholics Anonymous. What a great PI tool, man. She thought you were the greatest thing ever because she saw you save me from my death, from my own death. And she was so grateful to the very end of her life. I got married in sobriety to my second husband. I truly believe I found my soulmate. And we had that AA marriage for a long, long time. 22 years we were together. And from the outside, it looked really good. And from the inside, it didn't look too bad, unless you looked in the corners. What began to happen was that it came down to he had always very inappropriate friendships with other women. And in the end, I was 12-stepping a woman that finally called me and told me that she couldn't stay sober because of her guilt, because she was my husband's mistress. And I just begged her, just do it one more day. Just hang in there one more day. I really don't care. I really and truly did not care. And, she took her life the next day. And I didn't give a shit about my marriage. Anyone who's ever lost anyone in these rooms, you go over every single thing you said, and you do the woulda, coulda, shouldas. Did I say everything right? Today I know she doesn't hurt. But today I know that Alcoholics Anonymous taught me about the kind of woman I am and the kind of woman I want to be. And I knew I could no longer stay. That it was important to me to have someone I could trust. It was important to me to have someone that respected me. And I believe he loved me more than he's ever loved anyone. I truly do. But it wasn't enough for me. And I made the decision to leave that marriage. And I thought I was going to die. I was so angry and so hurt. And it was a small town. We'd moved to Idaho by this time. It was, we moved there in 93, and this is 2009. We were very grounded in that community. I was in the middle of serving on the board, and thank God for service, because I tell you, there was no hiding. I had to suit up and show up and pack that bag one more weekend to go wherever it was I needed to be. And thank God for the women I sponsored who just scooped me up and took care of me during that time, because I don't know what I did for them. I couldn't eat. And they would always call and say, "Let's have lunch," because they knew the only time I could eat a meal was when I was with them. Something about being with my sponsees, I was okay. But I moved out of that town and moved to the other side of the state. And it was not a pretty time. I ended up, there was a past delegate who said, "You got to come to my home group." And he just, of course I was doing the whole looking for a new home group. And his wasn't the closest to me. But he would just ride me like Zorro all the time about making it to his home group. And I ended up going out there and I fell in love because there was this group of women who just scooped me up and put me in the middle. And God Almighty, I was so upset. And I would come to meetings and you never knew whether I was going to be crying hysterically, curled up in a fetal position, or whether I was going to be breathing fire. And I'm from Texas and talked about running him over with a car quite a bit. And the men were like, "Jesus, can't y'all help her?" And the women And the women in that room were like, yeah, girl, let's go. I got a truck. I'll drive. Nobody ever shamed me. Nobody told me I should have been weller than that. And I can tell you, I'd call my sponsor and cry and bitch and moan and you know, it was such a hard time. But I'll tell you one thing, my sponsees who were still members of that same home group, they all hated him, right? They wanted to run him over. I said, no, that's my job. And I said, please, smile at him when he walks in the room. Wave at him. Give him a hug if he'll let you that close. But I want him to know that he's welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't you dare make him feel like he's not welcome here. Because as angry as I was at him, I did not want him to drink. Now, I secretly hoped he'd contract some rare disease and his penis would fall off. And he could sit in the rooms without it, but I didn't want him to drink. And I can tell you that I wrote a lot during that time, and what I found out was some of the same stuff that I came in these rooms with. If I only manage well, if I'm just pretty enough and I'm smart enough and I'm fast enough and I work hard enough, none of this bad stuff will happen to me. And at the end of that line was the same thing I found out in that first inventory, that I don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card just because I'm sober. I get to live life on life's terms. And guess what? When it rains, I get wet. And AA gave me the tools to go ahead and dry off and keep walking. And one day the clouds parted and I found that I was happy again. I don't know how it happened, but it was through just continuing to do the things. I didn't stop one thing I was supposed to be doing during that time. It's been so easy to say, I quit everything. I'm not sponsoring anybody, nothing. My God, what a death sentence that would have been. Because I don't know what I did for them, but I know what they did for me. I needed every single one of you to help carry me through that time. And I am so grateful that I know that you can have. And I'd had bad times in sobriety before, but that one just about killed me. It was just like being a newcomer again. And I can tell you that he and I have a good relationship today. I say please and thank you, and I wish him well. And we're very kind to each other today. And it had to start on my side. So, serving on the board was quite an experience. And Bob and I were talking, which I got to tell you about Bob. You know, he looks so sweet. He's not. And he arrived at the conference. We all called him Young Bob back then. I called him Young Bob, and he said, oh, my God, Madelene, that was 10 years and 5 kids ago. But he got there. He was like greener than goose shit in June, and we fit in together. So, but we had such a wonderful time, and, you know, crawling under the table when he would sing to us. And he does a great Barry White, by the way. That's why he has all those kids. But But service in Alcoholics Anonymous is not about getting to go to New York. We were talking about it at dinner. I'm not a big city. I grew up in Houston, but I'm a wide open spaces girl. There's a reason I moved to where I live. I love, to be outside, and I love wide open spaces. So New York was not my cup of tea. But what was my cup of tea was all the people I get to meet in these rooms that are like beautiful stones that you find someplace, and you pick it up and you remember, oh, I remember where I was when I met that person. I remember what their beautiful spirit was like. I remember what they shared. That's what service in AA is about. It's all the people you get to meet who make your life whole and give it meaning. It was a difficult time, and I used to get some of the worst hate mail as trustee. People I didn't even know. And it was shocking. I just didn't know that AA members wrote stuff like that, other than to their ex-husbands. But I would open it up, and it was short version was something like this. Dear trustee, you suck. Yours in Christ. Anyway. But if there's anything I've come away with during service is, one of my favorite mentors was Bob P., who was a past general manager and past trustee. And he talked about the thing that's going to destroy us is from within, and that's rigidity. We become, and it's this group process that happens. It happens in large groups of people where we have this affinity for conformity. And our literature says we conform to spiritual principles, but we have this thing where we want to conform to all these other things. And I'll tell you, dress codes, put it out there. Someone sends me a letter telling me I have to wear a dress or a skirt. I respectfully decline. We're not clubbing women in the heads and dragging them into caves by their hair anymore. And most places in this country or in this world, you don't have to. free world, you don't have to wear a dress or skirt to be acceptable as a woman. I feel the same thing for guys. You know, we talk about how it doesn't cost anything to serve Alcoholics Anonymous, and we talk about how we can't mandate to anyone that they have to conform, say anything, do anything, but you got to wear this. And, you know, I just think we talk about conformity to spiritual principles, and if you look at the definition of spiritual, it's not material. And I think clothing is a material possession. And as much as I would like to think of Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's as spiritual principles, they're not. And I believe I want anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous to feel comfortable coming as they are. I want them to feel comfortable serving Alcoholics Anonymous as they are. And I think it's one of those things that's kind of happened, telling people how they have to pray. I don't say the Lord's Prayer. It has nothing to do with my personal beliefs. It has to do with our beliefs in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we say it over and over and over again, we're not religious. And out of the mouth of a newcomer says, but why do we say that prayer? Good question. Because we've always done it that way. Terrible answer. I believe I don't want anyone who comes in here to feel like we have given them in any type of, even subconsciously, another requirement for membership. That you got to walk like I do, talk like I do, dress like I do, say what I do. What's happened is that if it is a meeting that closes with the Lord's Prayer, I say my own prayer at the end. And the funny thing is that it has so much more meaning because I'm praying from my heart and not just putting in the prayer tape and saying words that don't mean anything anymore. I never want to do anything that makes a newcomer or an old-timer think that they have to hold hands, circle up, do the hokey pokey or anything. Chanting. Oh, my white paw friends, I love you, icky, icky, icky. But damn with the chanting, you know? It's kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show when it first came out. Hey, fun. And then it got to where it was horrible because you couldn't hear the movie. If you took someone who didn't know the movie, they had no clue what it was. And I believe that so much of that talk back and reading with the readers has gotten to where one of the most important things we read at a meeting you can't hear anymore. And so, and again, it just, one of the reasons why people call us a cult is because we do cultish crap. There is some truth in those critics. And I think that if we don't sometimes stop and think about what it is we do and why we do it, and it does have a spiritual principle, then we have to ask ourselves, do we need to continue to do it? So for me, being true to what I feel and not worrying about whether you like me because what I said, you know, I can't worry about that. I cannot worry about being a popularity contest. What I worry about is that this program begins to slowly erode away from the spiritual principles it's founded on. And sometimes it makes being uncomfortable for us to talk about maybe some of those things maybe we should or should not do anymore. You know, I know that I've had to do a lot of uncomfortable stuff in sobriety. But I've also been showered with so much love and affection. And I want to close with this story, which I always love to close with after I've given you the big talk on religion. But when I was a delegate, Idaho showered me with so much love and affection, you'd think they're going to play Hail to the Chief when I walked in the room. And then when I became trustee, it was really bad. You know, when someone walks up and they like want your autograph, and my sponsees would be standing behind them going, you obviously haven't shared a room with her, have you? But you know, what I learned is that, and it's always such an exercise for me when I speak, because it's not something I say, oh boy, I want to do. In fact, the minute I've always said yes, I always think, damn, I wish I was a better liar. Because it's the last thing I want to do, because I go through this whole exercise before where I just nosedive. What am I doing here? I don't want to do this. I suck. They're going to know how sick I still am, blah, 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 blah. And what if I screw this up? And then I finally get to the point where I'm like, oh, to hell with it. It's just my damn story. I can't help it. And then there's the other side of that of what if I feel good afterwards? And I never want to be one of those people who starts to believe in my own press in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I close with this story. And I want you to picture in your minds that it is Jerusalem and it's Palm Sunday. And Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on his donkey. And it is packed. I mean, the streets are packed wall to wall with followers. And they are all throwing flowers, waving palms and singing Hail to Messiah, the chosen one. I mean, it is an awe-inspiring sight. Nothing compares to the way these people are acting about Jesus riding into town. Now, I want you to think for just 1 minute, what if the donkey thought all that was for him? He's seeing the same thing. How does he know it's not about him? And don't I, as a trusted servant in Alcoholics Anonymous, do the same thing? Start thinking about all the hoo-ha and all the, blah, 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 has anything to do with me. And not thinking about the perfect program, perfect message. And so I always, always need to remember that any of that comes my way, that it has nothing to do with me, but I do get to be the jackass that carries the message. Thank you.